Hi, this is Dustin here with Utah News again, and today we're lucky enough to be joined by Jen Garner, who was running for the House District 17 seat, and I believe that's Davis County. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect. So, no, I'm glad to have you with us today, and we've got a lot to go over, really. But first off, tell us a little bit how your story on running for office in general. What led you to that point?
Sure. So, 2020 awakened a bunch of us, right? Even more so. I think my eyes were a little bit open, but then 2020 was like a smack across the face for a lot of people. So initially I ran against the county commissioner who mandated the masks, even though her spouse told her, look, the masks don't work. And then later we found out that, all of that funding came because, like, all the funding for COVID came because of the mandates.
Right.
And that was that was never my intention. I needed floaties. I said, if you want me to run, I'm going to need some help. And so I had help. And I learned a ton. Um, and then I ran for the state central committee for the Utah GOP, and that has been an eye opener as well. It's been really great to get along with people who think differently, which is the Republican Party, right?
Right.
Thinking differently and then finding ways to come to a consensus and move things through. And then I did run against my representative because he didn't call me back, and he does better now. But everybody should have an opponent. It makes us better. It makes us better representatives.
Right, you get that truly bipartisan view that way. And how was your experience? I mean, I know we've got plenty of candidates that people well know as rhinos these days, or over on the Democratic side. I mean, how was your experience in dealing with a lot of the members that were even out there currently?
Well, uh, I think it's what we have to do moving forward is come back to the platform as Republicans. There, there's things that if there's a representative that doesn't agree with a lot of things on our platform, maybe they need to take a minute and self-identify as something else.
Right.
But if we could all get along better if we came back and look, these are the principles that we're supposed to agree upon. We're supposed to love the Constitution. So why aren't we looking through bills and all these other things through the lens of the Constitution? And I think that would benefit the party a ton and Utah in the end.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that, especially getting back to the Constitution. And that's a great segue. You were talking about getting into these bills, mandates, things of that nature. And there was a big piece of this you wanted to discuss with us today. So without holding that one up, let me share my screen a bit. They gave us some talking points, and a lot of this has to do with the housing, the homelessness. And I will pull up these first links that you sent us. And for everybody watching, we will have these in the description below. So there we are. So first off, and can you see that all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So first off on these ones is we have the Vote Jen Garner website, which is still up. So please, everybody, if you can, to help support her, just in any venture. But one of the first ones you gave me was on the bad data and how we actually got here. So I'll let you have the floor on this and just give us a little bit of a background on what we're going to be discussing here, and we'll just keep on going.
Sure. Thanks so much. So, this has been a long time coming. It isn't something that is new. It has been supported in our institutions. The University of Utah has something called the Kem C Gardner Institute, and they have been pushing bad data for a long time. Mostly, hey, this population growth is coming. It's coming. It's coming, and it's kind of been pushed at a crisis level, which I believe the end result is that we all just get exhausted from every crisis. Because, it's water, it's housing, it's population, it's taxes. It's like it's coming from every angle. But part of it is coming from our own institutions. And being paid for by our tax dollars. So Envision Utah has taken this information and they've kind of gone insane with it, with like the point. And these institutions also have crossovers of the legislators and the developers and the board members. And so there's people that are creating this data, well, sort of data, and then they're they're using that messaging to say, oh, this is what we need. This is what we need. But then in the end, they're really just making money off of it. So for instance, they're saying, oh, we're going to have this huge population growth, but it's any growth that's coming. Well, 56% of it is coming from outside of the state. So we're not, because our fertility rate is dropping. So we're now fourth. We're the fourth highest. We used to be the highest in our birth rate, and that is declining. Then there's data that shows that 56% of our growth is coming from outside of the state and outside of the country. But this is also data that is coming from the Kem C Gardner Institute. So I think there just needs to be actual data. Like if the Kem C Gardner Institute says, oh, we're going to have 1 million more people. Okay, well, that's what you said in 2020. That's what you said in 2021. And those numbers didn't bear out. So where's the actual data? And we have legislators that are so focused on, ooh, I can make money off of this. And they see the dollar signs instead of asking the real questions on, let's get to actual data.
And you were talking about this, and some of these I see were back from even 2022 on this one, August 1st, 22, declines in every state on the birth rate. And then the actual population increase was, it's two of our largest counties, of course, Utah County, Salt Lake County, 39%, 25%. And that's all coming from outside of the state and probably outside the country as well. And these are all just public data that is out there, but we don't have any context that's really easy to dive into. How did you stumble upon this?
I don't do anything by I'm informed not just by myself, but we all have to, whenever we hear something on the news, we have to go dig for the data ourselves. We can't trust just the mainstream media, of course. And so that's why it's really important that citizens get active on, okay, this is the actual data. Here's these sources and then you can decide for yourself, right? And so what you're doing is super important. But I think that there's this puzzle piece of what the housing problem is, and it's layers, and so layers, and so it's not something that even I think our legislators knew when they were passing these bills a long time ago. They just saw the dollar signs, right?
Right.
But things have added to the problem, like recently there was a mandate forcing high density housing in every city. So 17%, or the state told cities, if you want these tax dollars, then you need to have high density housing. Well, there's places like Fruit Heights that they only have 9 acres of undeveloped land. So how big of an apartment complex needs to be put there to meet that 17% high density housing or lose it?
Right.
And the rhetoric from our own governor has been, well, cities aren't unique. You don't get to be unique. But the problem is when these high density housing things were put in places, and it's really along like I-15 and along the traffic, right? They just assume that everybody is going to want to live in an apartment, and that's not the case. That's absolutely not the case. And nor are they going to want to live right downtown. And the land isn't going to ever be affordable when it's downtown. It's the most expensive land. And then they were building when materials were high. And so they claim that the focus is affordable housing, and none of it is ever going to be affordable housing because they're going about it the wrong way, but they're benefiting from it, so they just don't care. And then we're subsidizing it on more than one level. So, for instance, if I'm a developer,
Okay.
and I'm a legislator, then I was the first to know that I didn't go take out a loan. I didn't go take out a loan from banks that it's 3% low interest loans if a certain percentage of what I'm building is low income, and that is taxpayer funded. It is tax dollars in an account where at 3% we're probably losing, right? With inflation, we're losing that money. But we're going to give it to developers to build housing. So they're already getting a discount on financing. Then
Is that this investment program here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So HB 572. Um, no, absolutely. And this are tax dollars funding this. And as anybody I've talked to and come across, we see these monstrosities going up everywhere. And they're just compact housing, little condos and apartments, and they're building them quickly. That's what's even more scary is they just pop up almost overnight, seemingly. But with this subsidized funding, our tax dollars are going to these for these loans.
Right. Right. And it really should be funding that is lessens the burden on the taxpayer, but it's not. It's financing. It's financing more stack 'em and pack 'ems, and that is not quality of life, in my opinion. I've lived in apartments before. I hated it. Sometimes it's necessary based on income, like when you're first moving out, but these are not affordable. They're just not affordable. Um, so they're develop. So me as a developer, I get a low interest rate on the on building, and then if I'm building apartments, then I'm making some low income, but a lot of them are taking the Section 8 vouchers, which are also they're funded federally and state by more tax dollars that pay for housing. So Section 8 is you qualify based on income, and it's 30% of your income. And if you're not working, it's $50 a month. And there is a part of our population that we absolutely need to provide for people with disabilities and things like that. However, there are a lot of people that we have disincentivized to work because we've made that they call it the benefits cliff.
Okay.
But we've incentivized them to never work because okay, here you get into your home, and then your rent is $50 a month, but you get a job, and then we're automatically going to take more. Well, we've disincentivized working above the table, right? We probably incentivize working under the table, but that doesn't benefit. It doesn't benefit taxpayers, nor does it benefit if someone that wants to work.
Right.
So we've done it that way if there's so developers, if it's a house though, then we're subsidizing more by I think it was HB it was a $50 million was put into account for down payment assistance.
That's where we have it here. Yeah. And that was, I think it's the SB 0030. Is that the one? Or is that the 290?
No, it was Stuart Adams's bill, but so there's Utah Housing Corporation, which they help people with down payment assistance programs. And but this one was, you could borrow up to $20,000 for new builds, and it was sackable with the Utah Housing Corporation. You could buy down the interest rate and things like that. And it was this big story about there's a whole bunch of legislators that want affordable housing for their kids and their grandkids. But
Gotcha.
but it's all of Utah that needs more affordable housing. And so they spend this money and they make it more expensive for everybody else. Then there's county programs. I know that there's some outside of Davis County, but I know Davis County had another $50,000 that you could use for a down payment or closing costs or things like that. So here's essentially $70,000 for only the ones who know about it. And it's all taxpayer funded. Like it's taking from different programs, but all of it is taxpayer funded. So we've made it really easy on the developers. And one in three of our legislators are directly associated. Either they're doing the attorney stuff, they're doing they're developers themselves, they're contractors, they're apartment managers. 1 in 3 specifically are directly related to making money off of high density housing.
Wow, that's incredible. And you had shown us here the down payment program here, and this is the CBP1, the mobile application for it. And why is it associated with it was Customs and Border Protection?
Sorry, that's for the immigration.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that might have been the wrong link. My mistake.
Oh no, it's my mistake. But it's Davis County Home Buyer Assistance Program.
Gotcha.
So we have it on a state level, we have it on a federal level, but it's all coming through taxpayer dollars. So I think the biggest thing with Section 8 housing, to come back to that, is it was started in 2005, and it created a program called rapid rehousing, where if I lose my housing or wherever, then I go to the shelter, and within 30 days, I jump the 2 year or the 2 year or the 8 year waiting list for some places, that voucher waiting list if I am homeless. And so I spend 30 days in the shelter, and then I get fast tracked to the taxpayers paying for the majority of my rent. Um so that has caused problems. It's caused people from across the nation. So I used to be a contractor for the state helping people with disabilities find jobs, and I had clients that were at the shelter. And so I was down um, in that block before Operation Rio Grande, helping people get employment and get out of homelessness.
You and I were touching on that briefly earlier today on that one as well. Could you go in a little bit more about that on the homeless and the Rio Grande project?
Sure. So it looks like they spent about $67 million, mostly for police costs and court costs and things like that to get people out of homelessness. Some of it went towards rehab for people, and I think they had a few thousand people take that route instead of going to jail. They decided, okay, now's the time to go into rehab.
Okay.
But that was again taxpayer funded,
Right.
and the next legislative session, a lot of teeth were taken out of that bill, and so I think 3 people successfully made it through that program. So $67 million for 3 people to successfully make it through rehab.
3 people? Do you know possibly how many were even able to participate?
I did catch it online. Um, I think it was something. Oh, 661 were diverted from emergency shelters. I'm trying to. There's the Tribune has an article on it from 2020. Trying to find the number. Something like 1,600 people were diverted that direction.
There's still a staggering amount that were available to, but only 3 actually went through the program.
Well, more than that went through the. Oh, sorry.
You're okay.
275 treatment beds were added, and 150 people pleaded into the drug court program during that same time. So my numbers are off, but 1,400 people were arrested for felonies. 3,300 people had misdemeanor arrests, and then they were all offered. All of them are offered rehab, and some of them took it, some of them didn't. But 3 people made it successfully through rehab. So, I what I had found working downtown was that there was a lot of mental health that was being treated by drugs, and addiction had taken over their lives. But some of them were, um, some of them were families that they were taught, okay, this is how you deal with it. Like I knew someone that her mom taught her how to do meth when she was 11 years old. So what do you do? How do you break out of that when your mom teaches you to do meth at 11?
Right. You're raised with it. It becomes just a part of your personality at that point. So, oh, wow. Hey, what has happened to these people? I mean, that's a lot of funding that goes into this. Only a minute amount had even, successfully gone through the rehab sessions. What has happened to the rest of them? Are they just choosing to be homeless at this point, or is it just a drug problem, or mentality sake, depression, anxiety, etc.? What's your thoughts on that, or what data have you found?
Well, I think that it is the fear of all of that work to get out of it, and then end up do all of that work to have something happen and end up back there. And so it's the monster that they know, right? And I think they did that. They spent a whole lot of money breaking up that block, because it was 1,000 people where 75% of all of the crime in the entire state was happening on that block, and those businesses next to it just couldn't handle it anymore. They were waking up or heading into work, and there would be someone frozen to death in their stairwell, or there would be feces and on their front sidewalks, or anybody coming into the area would have their car broken into. And so these businesses just couldn't handle it anymore. They broke it up into 4 different, most of it was state funded. We did have some private donations, but then they broke it up into the 4 different areas. And now they're looking at, okay, this isn't working again. So let's put 1,200 beds in another facility. And so now they're looking in other counties, because that's now the area where the sports district is building, right?
Right.
They don't want it there. So now they're looking in other counties to put 1,200 beds. Well, the crime happened on that block because it was people who had sex offenses and have felonies and could not rent a regular apartment. And so now we're putting them in a bigger facility in one area. And I know that they've been looking at Davis County, they've been looking at other counties, but it's, unless they start actually solving the problem, it's not fair to just shove it somewhere else. It's just not fair.
Right.
Especially
when we've seen it over the past few years as well. I mean, you look at Kamala's back door in San Francisco. I mean, you have people that are, defecating on the streets in the public view, and they've got needles still stuck in their arm when they're found. It's happening here now in Salt Lake City. And I've driven through it myself, going downtown, whether it be for a meeting or an event. And the streets are just plagued with it. And it doesn't seem to be for lack of housing. So with all that money being funneled in and to these high rises and these homeless that will not rehab, how can we even begin to solve this? I know there's somewhat of a grassroots movement coming, but it doesn't seem like enough people are even aware about it to get it fixed. So just your side of it, how can we dig into this even more and help fix this base problem?
Well, I think there's not one answer, right? Because it's this thing that they've tried over and over again, and somebody made money off of it, and someone is not. Okay, so this is pre-Operation Rio Grande again.
Okay.
I attended a presentation of the director of the road home, and he stated that they were in their operation costs, they figured it was $500 per room night. So they had beds, but they also had an overflow area that people would sleep on a yoga mat on the kitchen floor. So they're counting $500. That's way more expensive than a hotel. That's more expensive than most people's rent, or mortgage, whatever. $500. So, but if everybody was kicked out of the facility at like 7:30 or 8 in the morning, so that someone else could come in and clean. Because of liability, they couldn't have residents there clean up after themselves. They had someone else come in and do it. And then if you weren't in line at 10:30, then you would get a bed in overflow. You would get a yoga mat on the kitchen floor. So immediately they did not support people trying to work to get out of homelessness. I was working with the deputy chief of police at the time that had made relationships with employers that would give second chances to people coming out of homelessness. And so we had six or seven guys that would hop on a shuttle and head out to work in the morning. And I said, look, every day I went into that line at 10:30, and I said, every day, if I give you a list of who hopped on that shuttle, will you save them a bed? And they said no. I'm like, how do people get out of homelessness then? And their response was, I don't know, they just do. And so I feel like the taxes were starting to fill a pinch, but legislating charity has made us resentful, and it's disconnected us from people really, really in need. And we're supposed to be the most charitable. We have the most volunteers, right?
Right.
But we also have a lot of people that are making money off of our most vulnerable, and that is not compassionate. telling people, oh yeah, come and live in this crime shelter while I make money hand over fist, $500 a day for each of you. And so there's no incentive to really get people out of homelessness, because in my opinion, they should all be looking at going out of business.
Right. I mean, they're incentivizing them to be homeless just for the room and board they can maintain and getting their money. I mean, $500 a night, like you mentioned. I mean, just within a few days, that would cover my entire mortgage for the year. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so Utah, or Housing First, that message got sent across the nation along with our low unemployment rate, and so there were people flooding in from all across the nation. Vegas was sending their people up saying, "Hey, yeah, Salt Lake will take care of you." And that was before open borders. That was before the CBP went up, where someone could just apply online for refugee status, and then come in, and the federal government considered them legal. And so they would come into our shelters and qualify for Section 8 housing, and we'd put them off there. And I just wish that we had more transparency from our own government, from our state government, as well as our federal government, because we have NGOs that are helping with this. Do you want to pull up the...
Actually, was just about to, so great segue there.
This is only one of them that I know was doing it. I have screenshots of them, of Catholic Community Services, that they do some good things, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has given them money to help them because they're one of the greatest homeless services providers.
And is this the one you wanted me to show?
Oh, yeah.
Catholic Community Services.
So they're getting federal funds to create, become a foster parent. Well, this is for unaccompanied minors. They were hiring for after-school program administrators for unaccompanied minors. They were hiring for therapists for unaccompanied minors. And all of this is coming in, and we're paying for every last part of it because of the Biden administration. And what is most concerning to me is where is Utah's involvement with the missing kids that came across the border unaccompanied, right? So Tara Rodas, who was a whistleblower in 2021, she went to the border to help process kids faster, and she found that some of them were going missing. I think she added 28,000 unaccompanied minors were missing. And the numbers I am hearing now, I think earlier this year it was at 320,000, and now we're at 500,000 missing kids that came across the border because the Biden administration changed how we processed them. There was no more DNA requirement, and there was no more, the DNA requirement showed the familial affiliation, and they didn't require that anymore. And, nor was there a background check required on someone that they were sending these kids to. So these kids would come across, they'd have a phone number, they'd call the phone number, and then taxpayer dollars would pay for sending this kid, whether it was by plane or by bus or whatever, to the location. And then when they follow up with a phone call later, no one would answer. And they are unable to find over 500,000 kids. And that to me is...
And it's horrendous, and you see it with our school right now in USA Harriman. The things that I'm just aware of are Alpine School District. I mean, they're inundated with a lot of these immigration children. Whether they be a part of that or not, I have no idea, but that could be a possibility. I mean, there's nowhere to know, especially if they're part of these foster programs.
Well, and the ones in the foster program we find, right? They because the foster parents will answer the phone call, but there's some that the open borders are being used as human trafficking, whether it's for labor. We have kids that are here working in warehouses and animal like hot dog places that make hot dogs.
Okay.
Like all of the food production. Sorry, my brain's not working.
You're all right.
But that's that. I'm sure it's not the life that they thought it would be, and that to me isn't compassionate. That's not taking care of our next generation.
Yeah, and that's what I was backing into. Is I had ran into another resource there that some of these foster programs were more or less a facade to get these children in and then traffic them elsewhere. It wasn't a legitimate foster program. Can you touch on that at all, or is that something you've run across?
I have seen that, but I've seen a lot of it with, hey, here's a job and you're going to get paid and we're going to provide housing. And then they come here and, then, yeah, they're living, the housing's provided for, but it's an awful place. It's like, sardines in a mobile home in the middle of the field that doesn't have proper, water sources and things like that. And I think there was a case like that in Weber County that, the employees hadn't been paid. They were living on site, and now they've been trafficked for labor, right? So it's not just kids; it's adults, and I'm hopeful that the next administration will clear those things up. But it's just the hard part for me is it's our tax dollars. Our tax dollars that are funding that trafficking, and that's not fair to us, and it's not fair to those families either.
No, and you had mentioned that here in some of the data you gave over was some of the increased funding of even schools, say 115% over the last 10 years, and associated with that. Could you touch on that topic a little bit more?
Sure. So our teachers, we're asking way too much of our teachers, first of all, and so I understand where the more funding has come from. However, the Biden administration used the McKinney-Vento Act, which allows school districts to count, instead of saying, oh, this student lives in a homeless shelter, they are homeless. Now they get to count anybody who lives in a multi-generational house, right? So let's say I get divorced and I end up moving in with my parents in their giant big house. My parents don't have a giant big house, but let's just say that because that's what's happening, especially in Davis County. So I move into my parents' giant big house. Well, my kids are counted as homeless. They qualify as homeless or homeless services through the McKinney-Vento Act. If I move in with my brother, my kids are counted as homeless. And in a lot of cases, they're not homeless. They also include, which I think is very discriminatory, anybody who lives in a mobile home park, because they don't consider that to be reliable housing. So how many kids? So they're counting. Oh, we have 3,000 kids in Davis School District that are homeless. Well, where's that actual data? Because are they living in one of the most affordable housing options that we have right now in a mobile home park? Well, yeah, some of them are there. Is that to say that that's not stable housing is discriminatory in my opinion. So they're using this McKinney-Vento Act to blur the actual data. The problem happens with, I count it like peanut butter, right? Let's spread the peanut butter across this whole problem. Well, you do that and somebody's getting peanut butter that didn't need peanut butter. And the person who really needs that peanut butter isn't going to get it. And that whole family isn't going to get as much as they need because someone who lives in a giant house with grandma is counted in those numbers. And so I believe it's being used as like a shock. Oh, we got to take care of this. We got to take care of this. They'll give us more money.
Right.
But the focus is moving away from the actual role of schools that is to educate our youth, and it's turning into community schools, and it's turning into homeless services for students. And I just feel like the bigger and bigger they do that, the further and further we get away from helping the whole family that really, really needs it. So,
Absolutely. No, that I had no idea about that because I've seen, and it was a conversation we had a few weeks ago too in our last broadcast, but more or less just a lot of the immigrant families that are coming abroad. And you do see it in these either high rises or these houses, large money flowing in. They buy these houses, and you have maybe two or three generational families that live in one residence. So those are probably some that are reaping these benefits, and it's not going to where it's needed. So I mean that definitely needs to be fixed. On this one, you were going into some topics on what needs to actually happen on this one with historical data and projections. Please touch on that for us.
so the people that have pushed this data, right? Let's talk about even the state of Utah that used to say 10% of the kids under 18, let's say in Weaver County, are intergenerational poverty or have been in or third, fourth, or fifth generation poverty. They used to give actual numbers like that. Well, now it's something like 37% are at risk. Well, at risk doesn't tell me how to fix anything,
No.
right? So, or even gives me the actual data on who to help, right? Here we are again with the peanut butter. It's, oh, here's 37%. Well, that, first of all, it leads to depression for everybody because now we're paying more in taxes. And we just think, oh, the world's going to pop because 37% of us are at risk of being in poverty. We need to get back to the actual data, and we need it from actual sources that aren't making money off of the final product, right? The final product being more government control, more government social programs. So for instance, pre-COVID, the benefits cliff. So the benefits would be like Section 8 housing, Medicaid, food stamps, things like that was equivalent to $35,000 a year. If you did nothing, then the benefits that you received were equivalent to about $35,000 a year.
Okay.
Pre-COVID. So post-COVID and post the Obamacare, the numbers that I'm seeing, especially out of Weaver County, are about 70,000. So in a sense, we're telling people that make under 70,000, you're going to get more benefits if you just never work, if you don't work. So we're incentivizing the people that are fighting to stay out of homelessness, to stay out of low income, to stay off of food stamp, to stay off all of those benefits. We're telling them, why are you working so hard? And I hope that number will come back to where it's supposed to be. But with housing costs being completely insane, like they're not, like when they increase taxes and they take taxes to provide for all of these people that we're not really solving a problem for, we're disincentivizing all of it. We're disincentivizing work. We're disincentivizing education. Because what's the point of getting an education if I don't have to worry that because you're not going to make 70,000, right?
Oh, wow. And I've noticed that too. I mean, even this last year with the assessor's record too, with the taxes, how much they went up, that increased my mortgage a substantial amount. And it has not gone up that much. I've been in my home for over 13 years, and it was a drastic increase. And that's just because of the property tax increase. And that's going to fund people just not working and disincentivizing being a part of society.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and something we kind of skipped over is there was a senator that kind of tried to address how how residential homeowners are carrying the burden of all of those tax increases, right?
Right.
So Governor Cox said, "Oh, we've given the biggest tax reduction in all of human history." Well, he didn't say human history, but he said in Utah, right? Some in the billions. But it ended up being 0.003, which is less than 1%. And I asked someone in his office, okay, I said, this essentially, though, is our taxes that you just moved to other taxing entities, correct? And his response was, well, yeah, the closer taxing entity is best. And while I agree with the closer taxing entity, which is like the city,
right,
the county, things like that, is best, it was deceptive in saying it was a tax cut when it was just shifting of taxes. So these same people that increase all these services, well, the 115% for schools is now on our property taxes. So our governor can claim that he cut taxes, but there, that's why our property taxes have increased so dramatically. It is dramatically.
It is drastically. I like that. And you had mentioned that before because we did skip over just real briefly on that too. And that goes into some of these public-private partnerships as well. Could you touch on that one? I know they've been a big burden as of late, especially with the housing, and they play a big part on something we definitely want to lower, if not maybe eliminate. Could you touch on that topic within the housing and the homelessness?
Well, it's on all of it though, right? It's Envision Utah receives taxpayer funds. The Kem C Gardner Institute receives taxpayer funds, so they're essentially a public-private partnership. It's in anybody who accepts government. I mean, it's in every single, um, it's in every single sector because it's the government choosing one provider that then that will get all the funding. And we saw this huge big time during COVID with the no bid contracts, that they chose a winner and then a lot of other businesses went out, right? It wasn't sustainable. But when there's a public-private partnership, every single time the government gets involved, it's not going to be efficient. It's not going to be the most efficient. And we've history absolutely tells us that. And when those taxes go up, it does burden the residential homeowner because only 10% of commercial properties, when you have an apartment complex, it's considered a commercial property. When you have a mobile home park, it's a commercial property. Only 10% of the values of those are actually public to our county assessor's offices. So there's but when my neighbor sells their house and I don't sell mine, my value is going to go up, which is great if I want to take out loans or have equity in my home or whatever. But that same thing is being those property, but my taxes also go up. But on commercial properties, their taxes aren't going up because only 10% of the value of all the commercial properties in the state are visible, that are current, right? So somebody might be paying some taxes, but these developers, right, that are legislators, so they get the tax incentive there, or to build, they get the tax incentive to pay for rent, and then their properties get property tax discounts because the value is not actually written in and they're not getting taxed appropriately. And I don't particularly want to say, okay, you need to level it all out, and small businesses and apartment complexes need to be even, because that just increases rent that already isn't affordable, right? That's not what I'm asking for. I am asking for quit raising taxes on all of us. Quit. I think the part that's difficult for me as well is I see that we've turned over our charity to legislators, and legislators make laws that force charity, and then me as a taxpayer, or anybody as a taxpayer, says, oh, well, no, there's already services, go and take advantage of those services, and there's no personal connection there at all. It's not me as a taxpayer, it's not my responsibility to actually care for somebody. So they found that getting out of depression and things like that are contributing to homelessness, the mental health, the mental illness and all of those things, some of it can be healed through connection. But we have legislated, don't connect here, it's just pay your taxes and it's not your problem anymore. And then when we see someone on the side of the road, we're like, oh, go get a job, go to the homeless shelter. And then we're not really, we've legislated compassion out of our own hearts.
It's a way to legally turn a blind eye and really not care about your community that much anymore because, I pay my taxes, but not everybody knows where it's actually going anymore.
Yeah. And so to get to how we start pushing back on this is, let's get the data. Let's get the actual data. And As far as the schools, there's FERPA that protects the identity and things like that. And every school district will say, oh, well, that protects all of our data. Well, no, you can get data. You can provide data. And our legislators need to start asking for that. Our legislators need to say, okay, here's the information from the Kem C Gardner Institute, but here's the other information from this that's tracking through other ways. Like they need to ask, you need to have the guts to ask for the actual data, because they're not spending taxpayer dollars wisely, in my opinion. We need to stop legislating compassion and get more nonprofits that aren't funded by taxpayer dollars, but nonprofits that are actually and there's a few programs that are working. I don't want them attacked right now, so I won't bring it up. But there are a few places that are really focused on accountability and commitments to get out of homelessness and to address addictions and things like that. But we need actual data, and we need government agencies to stay in their lane. We have state legislators that hate when the federal government overreaches, but they overreach into creating other forms of government, like these districts, like the sports district, like the all of these other businesses that become public-private partnerships, where they're the point. Yeah. Hello, the point that has its own government. That's not. First of all, it's not constitutional. And it's beyond the mark of the government. It's beyond. So the state hates it when the federal government do it. The cities hate when the counties do it. The counties hate when the state does it. And everybody just needs to get back into their lane, come back to the Constitution, ask if they should be doing it, not whether or not they can, but whether they should. It's like a whole Jurassic Park and opposite, right?
Right. And that would be a great call to action for everybody listening as well. Here is, get on your legislatures, make sure that they are asking for this information so we can get it. A lot of them have woken up to some of these bills that have gone through and what has been nefarious or a farce in general, and are looking for different information. So get on the phone, call your legislators, make sure they're digging for this data so we can get accurate information. Another part of that too, I mean, you had mentioned in some of this too, is that election integrity. We've got to make sure that we have fair and honest elections. But I know, please touch on that on your side of it as well.
Well, let me take off my tinfoil hat. And we just witnessed the breakdown of actual integrity in elections. And so we've created the SB 54. People being able to collect signatures to run for office has absolutely contributed to lower confidence. Let's say lower confidence in our elections. We have people who 1,400 people on our voter rolls that had passed that were sent a ballot. We have the signature path itself that instead of going to the counties for statewide races, they were all sent to one county, and someone did an overview on a report on it and didn't find exactly what they found, and then an auditor took a look at it. The OLAG took a look at it, and they found something different. And so there's these signatures that are so subjective, with walls that hinder transparency, that and that have led to legislators feeling like they are not accountable, like they don't have to be accountable to anybody. So everyone should run for office, in my opinion, because it says the message of maybe you're not doing a good job. Maybe you need to be more transparent. Maybe you need to ask for the data, because this happened because you didn't ask for data.
Yeah.
But when someone can gather 1,000 signatures and get back on the ballot, and people have grown so apathetic, and they don't actually look at, oh, he said he's never going to raise taxes. Well, that's who I'm going to vote for. Well, I'm sorry. A lot of people said they have never voted for a tax increase, but they voted for $900 million to go to the the Major League Baseball and the other sports stuff going on downtown. So I'm sorry, you can't say that you've never voted um for a tax increase if that's anyway.
No, and you mentioned the perfect word for it. And people just in society in general right now have become so apathetic to everything that's going on. It's, well, if I don't see it or if it doesn't affect me day to day, I don't care. Let me put something on my Instagram, or I'm just going to go to the local Starbucks and have a coffee. Oh, look at my pumpkin latte. The apathy is just horrendous. How can we help? I know it's not huge, but we do have a really solid grassroots effort here in Utah that's trying to wake people up. Hence why I'm doing what I'm doing. And how can we build that even stronger, in your opinion, and get more information out to the masses?
Well, people can there's a find your legislator, find my representative website, so find out who your actual people are. I think that the flag bill became such a controversial issue because that was something that people on both sides could get behind, right? Is why are we spending $500,000 for a new flag? And so people emailed in. People bugged their legislators, and everybody was freaking out because, oh, my district hates me now. Well, they did what they wanted to anyway, right? Because they were protected um by being able to gather signatures. But if we have people, like if you are in the school district and you see what's happening, if you have 5 kids that live in a giant big house and are on your list of students who qualify for homelessness, email your legislator and say, look, I'm a teacher. I'm not going to give out names, but this is what I see is happening. They all live in bigger houses than I do. Then that is a message that our legislators need to hear. I think there's a way to approach legislators with even if your hair is on fire, bring it down, write it out, and then go back and say, okay, I'm going to take out all the swear words. I'm going to take out all the insults. And then I'm going to include, okay, here's the data that I'm seeing. Here's the problems that I'm seeing. And I hope that you will ask more questions of other people in your district before you vote. If you're in an area where you have access to information, provide your legislator with that information. If they don't call you back, run against them.
I like that. And there's a lot of people that have been willing to get out there and run these days, which is nice to see. My only complaint on that is I was wanting to myself, and my district already had a good one that I supported, so I didn't want to interfere with that. But on that note, they always do it during the daytime. With any kind of election integrity changes or things of that nature, do you see any hope for improvement on the ability to have people get out there and run? Because working parents, things like that, it's really hard to get out there and be a part of running. Do you see any hope for that changing, or any different ways to maybe have people run if they're having a busy schedule?
Um, I'm a single parent. I homeschool and I ran for office.
Okay.
I think, and it was to send a message to the next generation of this is what you do when things aren't working out. Like I didn't do it because I wanted to like sign bills and whatever. It's because I wanted my kids to know, hey, here's this constitution. You have a right to run. You have a right to hold your legislators accountable. And someone that had to take deep breaths and get over some fear of things, like did it. And we can do hard things.
And that's a powerful message to everybody. A lot of people get scared of it, the fear of failure, being out there in public, and you did it. And you did a fantastic job, and you're still out there giving information and fighting the good fight. So I definitely appreciate that you're on board with all of this. I did want to come back full circle on the housing that we started with as well. Particular pressing matters with these high rises and everything going into play. What do you see happening on that one, aside from trying to contact our legislatures? I mean, it's becoming a little bit uncontrollable at this point. Are there any other major points you would love to share with us?
Sure. I think it's important for people to know if their legislator, if their representative, if their senator benefits from high density housing. And then I think it's important to ask your representative, hey, how are your high density housing units going? Because I know they're not full. I know you're not at 100% occupancy. What do you think you're going to do in the future? How do you think you're going to find more information on that? I think that we've seen on YouTube, that there's tons of housing that is still being built, and some of it's going slower because the demand is not there. And I think that will naturally, if the government can stay out of it, that will naturally lend to prices coming down to where it's more reasonable. But we don't have government staying out of it. Spencer Cox has now announced, we're mandating 35,000 homes by 2033?
333, yeah.
Something like that. Well, hello, mandates got us here. Mandates got us here with a whole bunch of apartments that aren't full. So why would more mandates for houses work? There's just, again, putting people back in their lane, and more people asking more questions of their legislators and their governors, and saying, hey, why did you vote this way when it's showing? Like, we need to educate. We need to be more educated ourselves. So if I'm in an area, so I am actually in an area that is a lot of older people that are retired, and they kind of done their share, right? And a lot, and the other ones are just surviving. And that's how I was not too long ago. I'm like, oh, as long as the president stays out of my pocket, I don't care about politics. Well, the president hasn't stayed out of my pocket. The governor hasn't stayed out of my pocket. My legislator hasn't stayed out of my pocket. It's time to demand more information, and then to do the work ourselves, to educate ourselves, and then to do something about it. And that might mean talking to your neighbor that maybe you don't get along because of your fence, but hey, we're in the same boat when it comes to our property taxes.
As they say, you know what rolls downhill, and I think everybody's just kind of buried in it at the moment. So we're kind of digging out of it and then fighting back up. So, well, no, Jen, it's been a fantastic time talking with you today. This is a really important matter. I know there's more coming on this, so we would love to have you back, of course. So feel free anytime to let us know more information you find, any other resources. We will definitely share all these links in the description below. But absolutely, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate all you're doing, Dustin. Best of luck.
Thanks, Jen.